Hey everybody, welcome back to Justice Radio. If you're listening to this, you are listening to 97.7 FM WBFF Veterans for Freedom Radio. They are the Truth and Broadcasting Corporation. Today we have I'm going to turn this down a little bit, but this is Swamp Justice. This is out now. It's out on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your music. Just type in Swamp Justice. It is a cool song. I'm going to turn this down a little bit because today we are going to be talking about and bringing someone on to talk about this case. It's the 392 case concerning Renee Beach and Greg Parker and his corporation. And I'm probably not doing it very good justice in Swamp Justice, but we're going to dive into the text messages from podcasters Liz Farrell and Mandy Matney and how they reveal stark differences between what they publicly claim and what they privately communicate in the Beach Parker saga and beyond. So to do that, I am going to bring on Elaine Greenwood from Super Woke News. You can find her on X. Are you on Facebook as well?
Absolutely not. No.
Okay. So just find her on X. And you're not on YouTube. We'll talk about that in a minute, but you're on Rumble?
I had synced Rumble with my YouTube account, so there's some content on Rumble that remains. I haven't added to it in a while. I leave it there. I think it holds up real well. Production values are a bit shaky, but no, I'm not on Rumble currently. It's too problematic. Are you on Rumble? It's too hard for content creators to be on Rumble.
No, I'm not on Rumble. I have enough social media to keep me busy.
Yeah. And Rumble was designed for gamers. It was not designed for content creators. It's difficult in just about every way. So I enjoy X right now, and I mostly cover politics. But I did cover what we refer to as the Murdaugh saga, and it impacted me. It impacted a lot of people. And so, yeah, but this 392 case, in fact, here's the pleading, what was filed. So I'm going to take your lead, Jim. How do you want to step into this? You want to talk about what the case was actually about?
Actually, I think you're probably the better person to, when I say 392 case, and for probably the last year, you've been talking about this to me, and you're like, you need to look into this 392. You need to look into this. I was like, I had all these other Murdaugh things going on. And then it came down upon me, and now I am thoroughly entrenched into the 392 case, but I know you have probably forgot more about this case than I know. So I'm going to tee it up to you and what you know about the 392 case.
Okay, so I was covering the Murdaugh situation. I actually had YouTube content before the murders, but after the murders on June 7th of 2021, I covered it all. And I covered it from the perspective of what was being filed in court and especially the exhibits attached to what was being filed in court, because there was so much gossip swirling around. You just couldn't wade through it all, but I could take, there was a foothold in what was going on. So this case, which was filed on December 3rd of 2021, is Mark Tinsley's attempt, my summary, to harass Greg Parker into settling this otherwise idiotic, untenable legal action. The 392 case it should have been dismissed for lack of merit immediately. It should never have dragged on this long. But what happened in the case was that it reveals actors that created this narrative about the Murdaughs and this narrative about who's guilty, who's innocent, who's not, and who's evil, and who's Joan of Arc or whatever, who are saints and who are villains. And it's all perfectly encapsulated in the 392 case. So what Mark Tinsley did, there was a mediation required in the 111 case, which is the case where Mark Tinsley sues Alec Murdaugh and others related to he's representing the mother of Mallory Beach, Renee Beach, in a wrongful death action. And he files that lawsuit before Paul is even charged. He files that lawsuit immediately. I mean, before the state was ready to go with what actually happened, who was driving the boat and whatever. So Tinsley jumps on that and he's scrambling with that. And supposedly deposition testimony or subpoenas for discovery in that case is what was supposed to have been the motivation for Alec allegedly killing his wife and his son. That never made sense once you looked at it. It doesn't make sense today. But so that case was kind of hanging in there. But they made, for that case that was filed in 2019, there was a mediation required by the court. And for that mediation, the plaintiff, that would be Renee Beach, through her attorneys, made they call it this, they refer to it as a sizzle reel, or they refer to it as a mediation reel that talks about the death of Mallory Beach. And in that mediation reel, they show pictures of Mallory Beach's body. These pictures were taken, I believe, by the Beaufort County Sheriff's Department and had not been released to the public, but they were made available somehow. Who do we know that worked at the Beaufort County Sheriff's Department at about that time? That would be, I think, Liz Farrell. But anyway, those pictures were made for this mediation reel, but the mediation reel was not intended to be made public. And then somehow it was released to a third party. And somehow that third party, either it was released directly to Vicki Ward and her producers, or it was released to other people in media. But somehow Vicki Ward, this journalist who has covered Jeffrey Epstein's situation in Vanity Fair, she was sort of a semi-respected journalist. She has an agreement to do a documentary about the Murdaughs, and the trailer for that, this, I believe that's what they're referring to as the sizzle reel, includes frames from this mediation reel. So Tinsley says, oh horrors, we're shocked. Parker's must have released that reel to media. Parker's must have released that reel to Vicki Ward. Parker's, and actually in this lawsuit that Tinsley files, he doesn't just sue Greg Parker, he sues Greg Parker's attorneys, Blake Greco and Jason DeCruz. He sues Vicki Ward. He sues two investigators who allegedly worked for Mr. Parker's, this guy, Max Furtati, and this other guy, Henry Rosado, and their private investigations company. What was odd always is who he didn't sue. He didn't sue Wes Donahue. He didn't sue other people that likely did have access to that, including people with Fitz News, either Liz Farrell or Mandy Matney or whatever. It was odd who got sued and who didn't. But in this lawsuit, Tinsley wants to spin a narrative that Greg Parker engaged in a massive social media campaign to bully or harass Renee Beach by releasing to the public photos of Mallory Beach, which would allegedly weaken her resolve to continue to sue in the 111 case. Okay, so we have to stop right here. That never happened. I'm on social media, you're on social media. Show me the evidence where Parker's engaged in any massive media campaign to use the photos of Mallory Beach when she was found after she had been in the water for a week to harass, bully, or intimidate Renee Beach in any way. That's simply, the premise here is bizarre because there's no evidence. If anybody is using media to manipulate a narrative, it's Mark Tinsley, it's Liz Farrell, it's Mandy Matney.
But they've always said publicly, it's not them. Tinsley has always said, you know, these girls are on the public index. They're working hard. They're independent journalists. They attack people.
Oh,
They attack people for saying that they're not. They get their troll army out. They play the victim.
no, when my dear friend, your dear friend Dana Kennedy contacted
I
because of
did.
the content I was making on YouTube. Um, I said, I don't, I know you because I read the New York Post, but could you send me 3 articles that you think are important so I get a sense of how you've covered this before we talk any further? She said, sure. And she sent me some 3 articles that she had written. And so when she called me back and we talked, the first thing I said is, you've been talking to Mark Tinsley. And she laughed and said, how do you know? And I said, because these are his words. You're either talking to Mark Tinsley or Eric Bland, but this is their narrative of this. This is their skewed version of what's happening. And you know what's so dangerous about that is when media can, like Tinsley would take your call. Eric Bland, I'm pretty sure, would take their call.
I've talked to Eric Bland. He says he doesn't know me, but I've talked to him, texted, talked.
But I don't think Eric Bland has ever walked by an open mic. He likes to be in the public eye. Nothing wrong with that, but let's not pretend that isn't what's so. So anyway, but the narrative, you could see it almost immediately if you were looking, if you weren't biased or jaded, or if you weren't monetizing the narrative at all, you were just looking at facts, you could say, wait a minute, these people are concocting a narrative and they're using Fitz News to do it. They're using the audience of Fitz News, and this narrative has holes you can drive a truck through.
Now, they say that didn't happen.
Good for them. I say,
lives in Mandy.
Fly, good for them. Here's the deal. I don't think that they are intrinsically bad people. I think that Liz Farrell is a talented writer and investigator. I think she got emotionally involved in her story in a way that no journalist can do. You cannot cover a story where you're personally involved in any aspect of it. And she became too involved with Tinsley, one way or another, too involved. And
well, let's get into that a little bit, because I wrote an article last week. It was about this Parker's case, the 392 case. I think didn't I trademark that? Every time we say 392, I get some. Anyway,
if I said Kennedy, if I said
right, Dana Kennedy, Washington University. So anytime, or not anytime, I wrote this article last week, and it was it's called "The Media Machine Inside the Expanding Legal Assaults Targeting South Carolina Attorney Mark Tinsley." And it says it's a new war on one of South Carolina's attorneys here. And so what's my computer doing? What the attorneys for Parker's did was they filed a subpoena for a person called Callie Lyons. And Callie Lyons is a former Fitz News journalist and researcher. And they requested all communications concerning Mandy Matney, concerning Liz Farrell, concerning Greg Parker, Parker's Kitchens, all communications concerning Tabor, I'm pronouncing this wrong, Mallard Beach, all notes, drafts, research documents connected to the case, all communications and recordings involving focus groups or mock trials, mock juries, and this subpoena is confirmed in the document. So she's been subpoenaed, and they're looking for text messages. And I have, at the CC News Network, Crime and Cask Investigations, I have seen some of these text messages. In fact, I've seen quite a few of them. I haven't seen them all. I was told when I looked at these that they were in the tune of about 5,000. Now, some of those might be duplicates, but we're talking thousands of text messages. So I wrote an article because we've kind of set up for everybody the text messages between Liz Farrell and Mandy Matney that I'm going to show you guys here reveal stark contradictions between what their public claims are on their podcast and what Mark Tinsley has said on their podcast when they interviewed him and what they actually say in private. So what do you think? You want to get into those?
Yes, but
What just happened?
I had my own experience and my own opinion about Liz and Andy and FitzNews and Tinsley and Bland and what they were doing, going back to very early in 2022. So that I've seen some of these texts that you're talking about. I've seen, it's hard to say if I've seen all of them or whatever, but I've seen enough to confirm that these people are exactly what I believe them to be. And what they were doing is every bit as, it's just disgusting. And it's not consistent with any concept of journalism that anybody could admire or respect. And I was talking about this a few minutes ago. It's important. I think that they started out with good intentions. I think that their egos got in the way. I think that they have defined themselves as something like the Joan of Arc or Jones of Arc of journalism, and they're delusional. And they have become mean and nasty and petty, and they use their bully pulpit to harm critics. If you criticize the narrative that they're selling, they'll hurt you. They'll come at you. They admit to having fake accounts. They come at you as trolls. At one point, they came at me. There's in those texts, they're talking about getting Mark Tinsley to threaten me because of content. They didn't like content I had made that was a different narrative about Greg Parker. How dare I have a different opinion than theirs? And
Right.
it's when you're reading it and it's about somebody else that they're talking about, that they have this anger for, it just seems wrong. But when it's you that they have this anger for, at one point, I think that Dylan Nolan is saying that they want to fillet me. I mean, they really had anger toward me. And I do believe that they were active in destroying my YouTube channel, just having it taken off. But they talk about weaponizing Mark Tinsley, getting Mark Tinsley to threaten to sue me. And that's chilling. Later in these text messages, they talk about going after a very prominent, successful podcaster. She's not part of this conversation. I'm not going to name her, but I certainly could under oath in a deposition. But they decide she's racist, and they get obsessed about where she went to high school. They are even obsessed about what she wore, I believe, to grade school. They go through yearbooks and comment on the clothes she chose. But later on, they decide that she's racist. They notice that her stepmother owns an IT staffing company. They decide that the stepmother is somehow colluding with the Murdaughs to help somehow cover up the murder of Stephen Smith, or there's somehow that this IT company of her stepmother's ties this podcaster to something to do with the death of Stephen Smith, when we know, Jim, that the Murdaughs did not have anything to do with the death of Stephen Smith. You know, I know, Sled knows, Eric Bland knows, Sandy Smith knows, and other people know who is responsible, the two kids that are responsible or that should likely be charged for the death, the hit and run death of Stephen Smith. And those two kids do not have last names of Murdaugh at all. And any good reporting at the time, back in 2015 and any time after that, would have eventually discovered what you discovered when you actually interviewed witnesses and went to the scene and just looked at the facts being presented and said, this doesn't make sense. So those texts that we're talking about, there are about 5,000 of them, I understand, they're disturbing. They're disturbing because of how Liz and Mandy and Will Folks and Jen Wood want to position themselves, because they present themselves as champions of journalism and champions of the truth and champions of the underdog. And that's not what is apparent to me in these texts. Instead,
well, let's get into some of that, because they had Mandy and Liz left Fitz News, and they started a company called Luna Shark. Well, I think Mandy did, anyways. And they had called episode 8, exclusive interview with Mark the Tiger Tinsley after reaching his $15 million settlement in boat crash case. This was in, I think, July of 2022, where Matney and Farrell present themselves as neutral journalists who merely reported on public filings in the Beach case. That is the setup. That is the standard that they go out. We are independent, neutral journalists. In public, they say that. And even Tinsley, in this particular one I took from the transcript, it says, and I quote Mark, "You and Mandy were really the ones watching the filings." And when he's referring to filings, he's talking about public filings, when an attorney files it in the public index and it goes up online, and you can go search those files. He said, you would see something filed and there would be an article. That was quote unquote Mark Tinsley. So this framing appears to portray Matney's and Farrell's coverage as reactive, document driven, and independent of Tinsley or any attorney involved in the case. Would you agree?
no. Would you? No. If they
No. Hold on. Would you agree what I just said refers back to what Tinsley said on their podcast? So the framing appears to portray that. Yeah, the answer is that. So, and any reinforces the narrative describing their roles as oppositional to Parker's media machine. Parker's media machine.
What media machine?
What? I don't know. And characterizing himself as blunt, straightforward litigator rather than a tactician coordinating messaging. He says, I quote, "I don't pull punches. I like giving it to the people who think they're entitled." But text messages say something completely different between Matney and Farrell. And let's get into them. So, and by the way, some of these text messages, it's hard to place where exactly they fit. We tried to kind of piece it together. So some of these may be out of order, but I think what they say is more important. And the ones that we viewed show Farrell she is receiving real-time updates from Mark Tinsley about case strategy, witness issues, and internal frustrations over settlement dynamics. And in one message, Farrell writes, and I quote, "Mark just called all pissed off again," unquote. In another, she relays the detailed explanation from Tinsley about alleged inequities in settlement talks. Mark feels like the bank is prioritizing white clients over the black ones. She's referring to Paul Murdaugh State Bank. So these are negotiations that Mark is having with Paul Murdaugh State Bank. I think it's in the Badger case. And
what they're talking about too is that Tinsley is the one that recommended the Satterfields reach out to Bland. So Bland is representing the Satterfields, and what was presented in media at the time, that we're talking about from September 15th of 2021 through to the filing of the 392 case and shortly thereafter, that Bland in a case that ends in 298, the 298 case, that has disappeared completely from the public index, but I have it, and I have all the exhibits that were filed with all these documents, and there are probably 100 exhibits. But what's clear from that is that Bland is piecing together what became known as the financial crimes. And that was the perception that was reported in media. But it turns out it seems like Liz Farrell was doing an extraordinary amount of work in that case. It also seems like Tinsley
According
was,
to the messages, yeah.
and Tinsley's actively involved in Bland's case. In fact, it seems like Bland, what do they call him? The Bland man? The Bland is kind of, my impression is they don't have a lot of respect for him. I've never had any respect for the guy. I think he's a clown. I think you can look at the filings and say, I know as a pro se litigant, I couldn't file a pleading that he does. He uses all caps and exclamation.
Golf strategies. Well, let's look at contradiction number 1, Farrell's public claim of distance versus private admissions. So Farrell wrote an article for Fitz News on December 21st about an article about Parker's mediation materials, and she dismissed allegations that she was close to Mark Tinsley. And in fact, she wrote in the article, a Facebook friendship, and she puts friendship in quote, a Facebook friendship is hardly a personal relationship. Yet in private messages, Farrell acknowledges, and this is quote, I mean, really, it was Mark who told me. And this came after she initially attributed information to Netflix and Cinemark before correcting herself. And this private admission directly contradicts her public claim. This is just one, by the way. And we're not going to go into all of them because I haven't seen all of them. There are hundreds with them, thousands in total. I'm just picking some out here. Huh?
You have to have her under oath. First of all, being duplicitous, for a journalist to be duplicitous to their audience is not a crime. So what we're talking about here isn't a crime.
Correct.
However, in these texts, they talk about Liz having gone too far for Mark.
Well, this one is weird here. Now, this is a message from someone else describing Farrell as emotionally invested in Tinsley, which is strange. And this one is, quote, she would do anything Tinsley, asked her to do. She would do anything he asked her to do. And the second one was, she lost her mind when he got married, referring to Mark.
There's another one. It's actually the JPEG 4286. And it says, I think Tinsley has her pulled into something completely illegal. And we're talking about a text exchange where the people in this exchange are journalists that we came to know because of Fitz News.
Yeah.
And so
here's another one. Farrell's claiming non-involvement in the mock juries, and I think the attorneys for Parkers are going to find this one interesting. It says on the podcast, Farrell frames herself as a journalist who reported on what was filed, not someone involved in behind-the-scenes strategic activities. But the texts say something different. And they show Farrell telling Matney, quote, truth teller. I'm assuming that's some sort of online name, maybe in Reddit, maybe in X, I don't know. Truth teller is the one who knows about the test juries and my involvement. I wasn't allowed to tell anyone what case the jury was for. Parker's. And in another message, she relays details about an individual who participated in a mock jury and allegedly left mid-session after recognizing the case's connection to the people she knew, which was Parker's. Again, this isn't perjury. It does, however, present a contradiction between public claims and private communications. It starts to get even more coordinated here with the contradiction of journalistic independence and coordinated narratives. So we'll talk and we'll go throughout the podcast. Matney and Farrell paint Greg Parker, as orchestrating a media campaign, as we said in the beginning of this, and present themselves as holding power to account. But the private messages go on and discuss retaliatory sounding media actions. And this one's from Mandy. It says, sit down, Sarah. I haven't even begun defaming you. LOL. Now, I'm not exactly sure who Sarah is. This may be a reference to Sarah Capelli, who worked for Parker's. But that I don't know. She spells Sarah wrong anyway. But and another message shows plans to publish a photograph to undercut a subject and says, can't wait to publish the pic of two of them chit-chatting. And Farrell responds, me too. The tone's informal. It's at times sarcastic, but it suggests that publishing decisions were sometimes discussed in personal rather than strictly professional contact. And messages from Farrell seeking information from Tinsley to shape the structure of the reporting. This one's interesting. I don't want to do a half-assed job just to get it done. I'm not sure how to break it up without knowing the whole picture. And here's another one. March 29, 2022, Liz Farrell writes an article called "Private Detective Knife Fighter Ordered to Hand over Work They Did for Greg Parker," referring to Sarah Capelli. And Farrell says in a text message, quote, "Apparently there could be a connection between the knife fighting and Seton show, etc.," referring to Seton Tucker and her show, Impact of Influence. Mandy says, "Wow."
Yeah.
From Mark, and Liz says, "Hold on," and Liz says, "Whoever this Twitter person is." So this is just another instance where Matney immediately goes to Farrell and says, if the information she received is from Mark Tinsley, not a public index. Go ahead. Okay. Sorry.
That some of what you just touched on, we need to understand in a context. So in the 3 case, Mark Tinsley, I believe, had information already in his possession, but he couldn't introduce it in a court of law without some legal way that he had acquired it. You know, much like anybody filing to introduce these texts in a court of law needs a legal way to have acquired them. So they file a subpoena. Okay, nothing wrong with that. So on a Friday afternoon, Tinsley subpoenas Wes Donahue's attorney, who is a legislative lawyer, Sandy San, and it's late in the day, and he misrepresents what the court has said. So he serves her. He wants all the records that Wes Donahue has related to Greg Parker, and Wes Donahue had been employed by Mr. Parker, and his work product, what Mr. Parker had paid.
Hold on, let me just interject this right here, because Liz Farrell, here's another text message, and it says, "Okay, Mark served Wes with a subpoena and through his attorney. Wes told Mark about Sarah Capelli." So
stop. This is what I'm trying to say, because people don't know the 392 case. So here's what happened.
Okay.
So Mark serves the subpoena late in the day, Friday night, and Sandy later testifies that she just responded to the subpoena. She didn't see that this was an unusual thing, really baloney. Attorneys do this late in the day because they want to get away with something over the weekend where the opposing party has no chance to respond to it till Monday. But anyway, so Sandy's sign gives Mark Tinsley all this documentation, including evidence, including documents that are the property of Greg Parker. When you hire an attorney, when your law firm hires an attorney, this is actually attorney work product. It's protected. And eventually in the case, the judge agreed it was protected. But Sandy dumps it all, gives it to Mark. I believe Mark actually drove over to her office and got it. He was so excited to get this under this false pretense. So he has all this documentation and he wants to use it to fry Greg Parker. It didn't work because it wasn't that damning. And eventually Mark Tinsley had to give those documents back to Mr. Parker, I believe. But Tinsley was doing this with Sarah Capelli too. There's the verbatim transcript of this conversations, text messages, and they include references to phone calls between Sarah Capelli and Mark Tinsley, where she has information. He's going to serve her with a subpoena so that he can use the information. He can introduce the information to embarrass Parker, but he's already probably got the information anyway. And in these exchanges, Tinsley is acknowledging that Sarah Capelli is a represented party, and he's encouraging her to fire her attorney. And then he's even giving her the wording on how to fire her attorney. And then he wants her to give him this information or pretend that she's giving him this information when I believe that he already had the information. And this became a dispute that bubbled to the surface in a March 2020 hearing, which is where I first, heard or saw Deborah Barbier in action in any case involving the Murdaughs, and first became aware that there actually was a credible attorney somehow involved in this. But what Tinsley was doing, he should have been, I think, disbarred for. because he's pushing the rules of professional conduct. I think he's gone over the line. But it's a tactic he uses all the time, that apparently, or he's used, at least we can see 2 times. He's used it with Sandy Sen, and he's trying to use it with Sarah Capelli. But for me to have figured that out just from reading court documents, if that's in fact what Liz and Mandy were doing, they would have figured it out too. They would have figured out that Mark Tinsley is hardly a credible, he's not the poster boy for ethical conduct as attorneys go. Now, that said, if you're the plaintiff, you want Mark Tinsley. He represents his clients with such vigor and such tenacity. He's so relentless. He's extraordinary as an advocate for his clients. But he absolutely pushes to the line, and I believe beyond the line. But no objective reporter viewing what he was doing could possibly position him as a white knight in the legal world. And Tinsley should never have been within 1,000 feet of the prosecution's case against Alec Murdaugh. He was jaded.
Right.
His ethics are highly questionable, and he seems to have a reckless disregard for the legal profession and how he practices it.
Well, here's some more. I just want to give you these just for reference here. And she's talking about, I never said the shield law doesn't apply here. I was acknowledging Verizon's right to comply with a subpoena. And it says the shield law doesn't come into play until we're in a courtroom. So they're talking about with holding their evidence. And there's another one. Mark and Wes do not know each other. Truth teller is the one that knows about the test juries. And these are all quotes, by the way. In my involvement, of course, in the mock jury. Here's more about Mark Tinsley concerning Liz Farrell. Mark just called all pissed off again, Liz. Mark feels like the bank is prioritizing the white clients over the black ones. Mark got flustered when I asked him. I asked Mark a few days ago, and he was like, Gaspacho just asked me the same question. Liz Farrell, weird, because Mike Gaspacho just asked Mark about it. Liz Farrell, I asked Mark a few days ago, and he was like, Gaspacho just asked me the same question. I think I have that twice. So let me just take that one out right now.
This I want to say about that Bland has got some mediation scheduled, and
But what they're talking about is Mike Gasparo. I think that's how you pronounce it. He's a producer for Netflix and the true crime series Murdaugh Murders: The Southern Scandal. So they call Michael Gasparo, Gasparro. They call him Gaspacho. But
so I said they saw a dollar amount. They saw a dollar value to the narrative they were spinning. This is what did bother me a lot. They saw a dollar value to this narrative they're helping to generate. They're helping to fabricate, and it was so lucrative. And people, Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Dateline, CNN, generated hundreds of millions of dollars globally with this narrative based largely on what was concocted by these. The common nexus of all these people, Liz and Jen Wood and Mandy Matney and Eric Bland and Mark Tinsley, is Will Folks, is Fitz News. And so on the one hand, great, good reporting. You certainly got inside the story. On the other hand, what the hell were you guys doing? Because
well, it would appear that the irony of the whole thing is that they're accusing Parkers of this inside media, what they call it?
A media campaign or to harangue, whatever. What they're
but
saying.
They're the ones, according to these text messages, appear to be the ones that are doing it.
Ta-da!
I mean, here's an interesting one. Sidebar, Alec Murdaugh, and this is opioids and Chris Wilson. Liz Farrell says, Wilson told Mark T that he knows 100% that Alex did not have an opioid addiction. That's never been put out there until now. And that he never, ever saw him dealing drugs or heard about it. And another quote, Mark is of the same opinion and keeps telling me that there's no evidence of Alex dealing drugs. Does that sound like Facebook friends to you?
Doesn't to me. I don't, but then I'm not on Facebook. I do have Facebook friends going back.
You know, in the context in which I'm referring to that question.
Who what?
I said, when I say she alleged they were only Facebook friends, you post a picture of you going out to dinner and hey, and they said good job, and that's like, so they're saying that they're very casual people, Facebook friends. That's what Facebook friends means. Does that appear like that's Facebook friends? Is my question.
No, it does not, Jim, appear like Facebook friends. But in these texts, they talk about Liz being suicidal. She's apparently very emotionally attached to aspects of this story that aren't healthy as a human being. You have a.
Did that have more to do with the mock jury? I don't recall that one. There's so many. Did that have to do with the mock jury?
No, I don't know. And I don't, it's such a personal thing. It's something I take it really seriously. I think people do. I have a lot of compassion for her, but what's clear is
go ahead.
Well, she's too emotionally invested in the story she's covering to have any objectivity at all. And she's not straightforward with the people that view her content about her lack of objectivity or about her emotional attachment to the very guy that's generating this whole thing. Here's how I see it is, Mark had some agenda that's pretty strong. I think it might have been just to destroy PMPED, but the boat crash happens. He jumps in and immediately signs up a client, and then he starts working to generate this narrative. And the first time I saw the narrative, it came from Greg Roman. It's an article he published, but it started to build this crescendo of the evil Alec Murdaugh. Now, I don't think that Tinsley thought it would explode to this mushroom cloud of Hulu documentaries and Netflix documentaries and all of this. And on the one hand, good attorneys should be using media to advance their cause of action. I'm not critical of him for doing that. I'm critical of how far he went with it. And I'm critical of any news organization that got in bed with him and helped him amplify this or generate it and sell it to the world while they're claiming to be great independent journalists who only tell the truth. Faith in the sound. We tell the truth. Well, no, you were monetizing a narrative that you helped create.
Well, here's some more on Netflix and the Netflix documentary in the Murdaugh murders, which is interesting. These are all Liz Farrell quotes, by the way. So quote unquote to the whole darn thing. Jed Lipinski is apparently no longer associated with the Netflix project. Jed Lipinski worked for Cinemark. He is a producer, I believe. Then there was an apparent, I can't read. There was apparently a falling out related to his association with Redditor 2. We should talk to Will about removing him from that folder. They're referring to Jed Lipinski, who works for Cinemark, who eventually got everything to Netflix. I wonder if Sean Kent, Buster Murdaugh's attorney, is watching this video. He'd be interested in this. He said he follows all those trolls that were targeting us. After I had a breakdown with Mark about it, it got quiet from that particular group. Liz, I straight up asked him whether the falling out happened because of Jed was part of it. And he said maybe, which I'm taking as a yes. I knew because Netflix told me Mike Gazpacho, keep calling Gazpacho, Mike found it. And then referring to, I believe, your sizzle reel you were talking about. I didn't know that Netflix or Cinemark or Jed Lipinski had access to all of Liz and Mandy's files.
It was Spitz News's files.
Well, whoever it was.
Well, yeah, because if Will Folks is going to close him out of the back door.
Oh, yeah. They said, yeah, you should we should talk to Will about removing him from the folder.
See, and that's problematic for me because, Will Folks, I wish him well. He's got, what does he have, 35, 40, 50 children by now, and they all need to go to college. So I want him to continue to make a living. And I think it's really important that we have a lot of journalists. The press can be small people. I'm part of the press. You're part of the press. We have First Amendment protection for the content we make, and we play a vital role in the survival of this constitutional republic. So I respect that. But if I have an agenda, if I'm covering a story and I'm personally involved in the story I'm covering, I have to disclose. It's an ethical matter. It's not a legal matter. It's an ethical matter. You would be grossly misleading your audience. But to take this narrative that they had that benefited Mark Tinsley financially enormously, and benefited Eric Bland enormously, and benefited Netflix enormously, it got such traction. It's global. And people, ask Grok how evil Alec Murdaugh is, and they'll quote Mandy Matney, Liz Farrell, and Fitz News. It got accepted as fact, and nobody questioned from the very beginning just little things that made no sense. And so looking at these texts, I personally think that when I read about their intent toward me, I am disturbed by it. I am not happy about it. I don't know if I'll take action about it or not. I'm not ruling it in or ruling it out. I'm going to set it aside. But it's outrageous what they do. And it hurts people. And it hurts them financially. It hurts them emotionally. And then anybody that disagrees with them is a troll or is evil. And I think that
Or a cruel liar.
A cruel liar, yeah.
Never heard the interview, but I'm a cruel liar. So I just go back to this again, and her quote from that December 1st article, she wrote, "Facebook friendship is hardly a personal relationship. However, there are bank settlements from Palmetto State Bank where Liz Farrell is talking what she has had conversations with Mark Tinsley about, according to these messages. And she says, and quote, PSB has basically told him, Mark Tinsley, they see no value in settling the Badger case." And then she put in quotes, "They are black." And he found out from Eric Bland last night that PSB and he are meeting Tuesday, RE pliers settling. And this is Liz finding out from Tinsley about banks settling their case. And this sentence alone, it exposes allegations of journalist lawyer collusion, breach of settlement confidentiality, coordinated narrative shaping, influence of media on litigation outcomes, and compromised journalistic independence. I mean, she is saying in text messages to people, if these are true, what she's saying, or what she's making them up in lines, I don't know, but if she's true what she's saying, she is telling people about the inside look of negotiations between the attorney Mark Tinsley and Eric Bland and Palmetto State Bank. They haven't even settled it yet, and she knows this information.
Which is, I don't know that that's illegal. This is, I'm familiar with lots of different kinds of litigation.
Well, it's a Facebook friendship, so remember that.
I agree with you. It's a Facebook friend. To me, that greatly exceeds any Facebook friendship I've ever known about. The thing is, she's too
far. I wonder
far.
what she told them in her deposition. Said she was deposed for 7 hours. I wonder if she said that she's never this, never that.
I love reading depositions. I understand this was a video deposition, but I love reading depositions. It's pretty much my favorite thing to do in the whole world, next to reading interrogatories, next to reading complaints.
Here's something they're talking about. This is Liz Farrell again, and quote, "If you think Dick manhandled Creighton, you should have seen what he did with Megan." What?
I didn't know who that was. I didn't know who that meant. They talk about Meredith, and they talk about before they go on this harangue with this podcast they clearly hate. They call her evil and all of this. They object to Meredith, and I didn't know who Meredith was. It's funny how these names, though, some of them you read through these texts and you say, "Oh my God, this is what they're saying about so and so, and this is what they're saying about so and so." And we all have a right to a private opinion. I don't hold wonderful, warm, fuzzy thoughts about them in private, but you can't claim to be an independent journalist or this bastion of journalism. Doesn't Mandy go around to schools of journalism to present herself as the Joan of Arc of journalism?
And he gets paid well. If I'm the University of Kansas, I want my money back. Here's one that Liz Farrell was talking about, and she's talking about calling Palmetto State Bank's crisis communications team. She says, can we ask PSB's crisis communication team about it and pressure them that way by pretending we know more? She does know more, according to the text.
Apparently,
we can, and she goes, and we can also tell Mark and Ryan Alphen. Ryan Alphen is a SLED agent. So they're supplying information. So what they're saying is, according to these texts, they're going to contact Palmetto State Bank and these communications and pressure them in getting more information. And then they can tell Mark Tinsley about it and tell Ryan Alphen from SLED. Isn't that interesting?
Well,
I'm not sure that's how journalism works, is it?
And, I don't know. I could have gotten a degree in journalism past.
They keep telling me I'm not a journalist. So.
Okay, no, but listen, in mass media law, in any mass media law class I ever took, or I took a couple classes from Dr. Pimber, who's one of the most highly respected, you could put this on the list of people I say too often, most highly respected professors of anything to do with journalism that this country's ever produced. I don't recall this kind of relationship they have with people they're supposed to be covering objectively would fall within the bounds of journalism. To me, it seems like somebody with a deep emotional attachment colluding with an attorney who has a financial agenda to create a narrative that frankly harms other people. And I don't like that. I think it's...
But here's what, think about this, and we talked about this the other day. So we talked about this, December 1st, Farrell writes the article at Fitz News where she empathetically says, emphatically, I can't read today, emphatically that neither she nor Mandy received confidential case materials from Tinsley. And that's where she says Mandy was never shown a video by Tinsley. A Facebook friendship is hardly a personal relationship. She also frames Parker's accusations as baseless. We believe that the weakness of the evidence spoke for itself, and the clear takeaway she tries to deliver to readers is that we, Farrell and Matney, were not receiving privileged inside information from Mark Tinsley. Any suggestion we had this relationship with him was ridiculous. That's the argument that they have. However, you said that the Parker's 392 case was filed on December 3rd of 2021.
Yes.
This article, which
is December 1st.
Is December 1st, 2021, which was interesting. This article was up at Fitz News 2 weeks ago. It's now deleted. I found it on the Internet Archive, but
I have those printed. I printed copies of. I used to print copies.
It's interesting to note here though that Farrell had only been with Fitz a few weeks at this time. I think she started mid-November of 2021, if I'm correct.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, did Farrell have advanced access to confidential mediation materials to non-public allegations and the Tinsley's internal legal strategy before it appeared in the public record 2 days later?
I mean,
the text messages do show her coordinating with Mandy behind the scenes, sharing exhibits that were not public, discussing subpoenas, strategizing around legal shield protections, and communicating with attorneys on case details that they should never have in that newsroom. How did she go out and write an article about what is in the 392 case when it wasn't even filed until 2 days later?
Because articles written by crappy journalists are not statements made under oath and under penalty of perjury. She can write whatever she wants. We know that at one point, Eric Bland was angry at Parker's, and this is a Friday. There's an email exchange. He's furious, and I guess there were some phone calls. And he says in this conversation with Parker's attorneys that I'm going to get media to basically write a horrible story about you, that Parker's is a bad corporation, basically.
Who said that?
Eric Bland. He's threatening Parker's legal counsel. It had to do with...
Who's he friends with in the media?
The next morning, 9 o'clock the next morning, Liz Farrell has published an article highly critical again of Parker's. And so the reason I know about this conversation and then the subsequent article is that Parker's introduced this to say to the court, there's this collusion between Fitz News and these attorneys that is insurmountable, or it's incredibly destructive. They are weaponizing media to advance their agenda, and that's absolutely what they did. Eric Bland did it. Tinsley did it. So to pretend any pretense that they're objective,
according to these messages, it appears so. And by the way, you've seen them, and I've seen some. Eric Bland better reevaluate who he's doing business with, because the way they laugh at him and make fun of him, it's quite interesting. But
I think he likes Eric Bland likes to be in media. He got mad at you the other day because you had photoshopped that picture of the book, and so he likes that. He wants to be the center of attention. He loves.
I don't even know this guy. I'm like, dude, I just talked to you 3 weeks ago. Shut up. But the big question is, where did Liz Farrell get these confidential details? Where did the mediation video descriptions, the allegations against Parker, and the entire narrative she published 2 days before the lawsuit was even filed? I can't talk today. What's going on?
Well, we questioned a lot about who these sources were. And if you just, like
it appears it was Mark Tinsley.
It was Mark Tinsley. I've said this, I've made content about this. The story here isn't about Al. The story is about Mark Tinsley. It's always been about Mark Tinsley. I think he's a very interesting man. I'd love to know why he switched from being a forestry major to suddenly deciding to go to law school. There's something about his life experience that's a huge pivot. And I think he's an interesting guy. I think that if I were a plaintiff, I would want him representing me because he's so aggressive. You talk about aggressively advocating for his clients. He defines that. But for the rest of humanity, he goes too far. And if I'm a reader reading news content or listening to podcasts, it's fine. If Liz and Mandy want to say, look, we got too far into this. We are too emotionally involved. And we did help shape a narrative that objectively is full of crap. We went way too far. Like right now, they won't acknowledge that you've very clearly identified who killed Stephen Smith. And that's not looking for them. That is conflicting with this narrative they've gotten away with for so long.
And conflicting with the Hulu show. Completely conflicting is they can say whatever they want to, that this is fictionalized for TV to try to get out of something. It put Buster up and doing that again. It's not Buster. Buster Murdaugh had nothing to do with it, according to the source that I talked to, who SLED has the information, and they got the whole thing. I mean, it was two people that.
Jim, they want to fillet you. By the way, you guys, that's not a nice thing to want to do. Anyway, but
they do talk about filleting people. I'm going to fillet that person.
Me, I'm the people they talked about doing that.
Oh, you're more than just you. I think the word fillet is, yeah, they want to fillet this person. They do talk about going into their fake accounts that they have, and apparently they have numerous fake accounts that they go into to. Probably because they're blocked for content to go and attack people. But they talk about that wide open of the little sock puppet accounts, which I think they claim publicly that they don't do, but that's the opposite.
Jim, when you do that, when you use a fake account or you're anonymous to harass somebody online, what's that called? Isn't that trolling? And
don't they hate people that do that to them?
They are, I hate to say this, but they're so neurotic. They're paranoid. They are very paranoid about being trolled.
Allegedly.
No, they're neurotic. That's my opinion, flat out. I'm not alleged. I see incredibly neurotic behavior. They're paranoid. They're compulsive. They're erratic. They're irrational. Those are my opinions of them. But they have a right to be that. They're human beings. They can be whatever they want. They have a right to
Right, but where that comes into play is that they always play the victim, the good old boy network. They are the good old boy network. They have replaced the good old boy network that they took down, and they are now it. And then they play the victim like, I can't believe they're saying this about me. I can't believe my voice and this and that and what I wear. The things they say about women, I mean, I'm telling you what, the C word is probably the nicest thing they say about women. They attack women arbitrarily, just going after them, saying the nastiest, raunchiest things about people, attacking them, going on their fake accounts. We're going to fillet them. We need to get Mark to file a lawsuit against them. We need to shut them up. We need to do this. We need to do that. This person's this. I'm like, God. The hate that they have. And then they come out and like, I'm here in my Sunday dress and I'm just doing a journalistic and, job, and I'm trying to be independent and I'm just nice and everybody's attacking me. In the meantime, in the privately, these messages are going to show, and I do believe Debbie Barbier has most of these, if not all of them. So the truth better come out. They better tell the truth, because their truth is already in the hands of the attorneys.
Deborah Barbier is an extraordinary attorney, and she represents Greg Parker. She's one of the many attorneys that represent Greg Parker. But Greg Parker doesn't have an interest in exposing what we're talking about here. He has, he could have walked away from this lawsuit, I think, a long time ago.
He may not, but to get to what he wants, he's going to have to show these.
Yeah, some of it. Yes, some of it. No, some of what we're talking about here is just our impressions, having seen these people. It's not illegal what they're doing. It's just reprehensible, in my opinion. So, well,
it's against everything they do. They say one thing and act another. There's that old saying of something along the lines of, you can always evaluate somebody based off of when they don't think anybody's looking. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and then some of these messages, they don't think anybody's looking, but now the whole world's going to see them.
Okay, but I don't have any interest in embarrassing them. I don't have any interest in piling on them. But I care a great deal about the First Amendment. I care a great deal about the press. And if you're going to say, hey, we're just making this stuff up, or we are in bed with Mark Tinsley and his agenda, and I mean that rhetorically, not literally, but then that's fine. And if people want to,
but let me throw this hypothetical out at you. What if they did say, I got this from Mark, I got this from Mark, I got this from Mark Tinsley, this Mark, quoting Mark Tinsley in all their articles? Why didn't they? Because that's, according to the text messages, that's where they got their information from. So why didn't they quote Mark Tinsley?
Because they understand that the public would see it for what it was. The agenda of an attorney who's engaged in these massive civil lawsuits. He wants a narrative out there so he can win millions and millions of dollars. He and Eric Bland. So they push this, they get Fitz News and these virtue signaling journalists to push this fake narrative because it enriched them incredibly. And one thing I have to say, I admire Greg Parker for not giving up on this and saying, no, you brought this on, you brought this to me, you engaged in this, you damaged my company, you damaged my reputation, I'm holding your feet to the fire, and we're going to unwind this. And Greg Parker is doing more of a service to all of us in doing that, because who else would have brought this forward? Alec Murdaugh isn't going to bring this forward. He doesn't have the ability. Nobody would believe him, regardless of what he said at this point. Dick and Jim had to have known some of this was going on, and they sort of are oblivious to it. So I really admire Greg Parker. Good, bad, or indifferent, the guy is a hero. As far as Tinsley, it's for the South Carolina Bar Association to decide what to do with the guy. A part of me, as a plaintiff, I think he's fantastic. but somebody that has respect for the law, I think he's gone too far. He goes too far again and again. As somebody that respects journalism, Liz and Mandy are an aberration. They're delusional if they think they're credible journalists.
This right here reminds me of Greg Parker.
You tell him I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? With me. You tell him I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me.
That's how I see Greg Parker.
And that's a good way to wrap this up. But in a way, that's also Mark Tinsley. If Mark Tinsley were representing you, he was good to Renee Beach. You can't deny that. But what he did, by the way, this circus, why we care about it is it totally obscured who did kill Paul and Maggie. It obscured who actually, even now, there have been no arrests made in the hit and run death of Stephen Smith. And there's just so much we don't know because this narrative, people believed the narrative that I think is wholly not credible. It's contrived.
This narrative. They're made up narrative. Is that what you're referring to?
They're what?
I don't know, not made up narrative, but their narrative is they're not telling people that this is where they're getting all this information from.
And they're not disclosing their incredible lack of objectivity. So Jim, happy Thanksgiving to you. Yeah. I'm already on my New Year's diet.
I need to too. Yeah, so this has been good. We're listening to Swamp Justice Radio on 97.7 FM WVFF Veterans for Freedom Radio, the Truth and Broadcasting Corporation. Listen to Swamp Justice Radio when you're in the Cottageville, Walterboro area. You can see us on YouTube. You can see us on TikTok. You can see Elaine, Super Woke News. Go check her out on X. I'm interested to see where all this is going with Parker in this case. What's next with it? I think Callie had to have her stuff to them this week, I think. So that's moving along.
I'm guessing though that Tinsley is going to claim privilege, and then so he's going to have to produce a privilege log. That has not worked well. Doesn't seem to be able to produce those. That is an issue that came up years earlier in this lawsuit, in this very 392 lawsuit. So he's got some work to do over Thanksgiving. He's got to be pissed. I'm thinking he wishes he had never filed this idiotic, meritless lawsuit to start with, because Greg Parker ain't playing, and Greg Parker doesn't have to modify what he wants to do based on an insurance company. He can fund this himself, and he has, and he will. And he's going to see it through to the end.
I bet he's not happy with everything he told Liz Farrell, ended up in a text message that's now going to Greg Parker. Was he the attorney? Did he represent Liz Farrell in that deposition?
Did he? I don't know.
I think he did. That'll be interesting to see where that goes.
He's representing. That's kind of odd. It's called defending a deposition, by the way. So if it depends on who wanted her deposed. So typically,
Greg Parker's attorneys wanted Liz Farrell deposed. I think she was deposed for 7 hours. I think Mark Tinsley flew to Maryland, I think, and was there with her as her attorney.
Good for him. Because that's what Facebook friends do. We're just friends on Facebook.
Well, my question for you, I guess this is a legal question, and I defer to you, but what if, and I'm not saying she did, what if? The question is, what if? It's a hypothetical. What if she lied in that deposition and said, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I didn't coordinate with Mark, I didn't talk to Mark, I got him off in the public filings. This. I did everything the way I said I did it in public. And he knows it, that she didn't do it that way because he was giving it to her. And then she goes and writes about it. And now all these text messages come up. What would happen? I don't even know.
Okay. So if she lies under oath, that's perjury. If he is allowing her to lie under oath, that's suborning perjury. What would happen to her?
It doesn't sound good.
Well, but typically nothing happens to people that commit perjury unless you're somehow aligned with Donald Trump, in which case they throw the book at you. But otherwise, people commit perjury in depositions all the time. And you know how they correct it? They add an addendum to the transcript of the deposition saying, I have a new memory. I misremembered. I misspoke. I now have a new memory. You'd be surprised.
I misremembered my whole 7 hours. Let me redo it.
I misspoke, yes. I misspoke 20 times, 100 times. But suborning perjury for Tinsley, if that is what he did, and that's an if,
Yeah.
barred, I believe, in any state in this country. So it's a no-no, but, you know, all of this has to be in a context. And so we're assuming that there's this pool of ethical, capable attorneys. And, you know, I'm 72 years old. What Mark Tinsley is doing is very consistent with what I've seen attorneys do. So it's not unusual that he does this. And I think that they get away with it. That's my response to that is I imagine he would get away with it if he did it. And I'm not sure he did it. The thing that's unusual here is creating this narrative, is manipulating the public with this narrative that generated hundreds of millions of dollars in sale for Netflix and Hulu. That is extraordinary. I don't think any attorney ever has been that successful at using media to create a narrative. And it gets back
I
to
wonder if
this.
Fitz News got paid from them. They gave him all their files.
I've heard they didn't, but who knows? Here's the deal. Never underestimate the power of a woman. I think Liz Farrell is a very talented woman and a very capable investigator. I think had she used her talent in a better way, she would be very successful. I think that she's sort of a cautionary tale about aligning yourself emotionally with somebody that in the end is using you. And that's kind of my take on it. There's a story there that I think people could write.
I did. And it's going to get posted today.
What?
I said I did write an article about it. It's going to get posted today. Actually, this thing is probably a book. But we'll start out with this article. There's more to it. I mean, there are thousands. They talk about everything. It's crazy.
And if they had been, you know, like if we had these messages with Dana Kennedy, we wouldn't be talking about it. No, they are unusual as journalists in that they chose to position themselves as these warriors for journalism and these virtuous, you know, they're the standard bearer for journalism. And so they invite this kind of criticism and this kind of review because of who they position themselves publicly to be. And so
I guess to answer the question, if they're the standard of what a journalist looks like, then no, I'm not a journalist. I don't do it that way.
Well, I wish I could say that there are a lot of better journalists. There aren't. I think journalists, I pay a lot of attention to journalism. It's part of caring about political science, and it's appalling. But again, what's unique about Liz and Mandy is how they monetized this. The narrative about themselves is as false as every other narrative. And had they not done that, I think that they would be, you could admire them, but they're delusional. They just went too far. And they did some pretty disgusting things.
With these text messages that I understand have been widely distributed and were accessible and ascertained legally, went through the whole smell test. It's going to be interesting. We'll see. Have a happy Thanksgiving. You are listening to Swamp Justice Radio and Elaine Greenwood from Super Woke News. We'll see how this one goes. See you guys. Bye.
Bye.